Good afternoon. The time is 4 o'clock. I think we can go on and get started. I would like to start by welcoming everyone to this afternoon's workshop on the 2022 Ozone Plan for attainment of the 2015 8-hour ozone standard. My name is Jessie Fierro, and I'm the Director of Air Quality Planning here at the Air District, and I'm joined by several other speakers who will be helping me to present the information we have to share with you today. This meeting is being recorded via Zoom. Only the panelists are visible right now. We do invite your questions and comments at the end of our presentation today, and you have a few ways to send that to us, and that will be shown on the slides here in a moment. You can email us at webcast@valleyair.org, and we will be monitoring that and addressing those comments at the end. You can share comments with staff at any time during the development of this ozone plan, and that email address is available in the public notice for this workshop, and we'll show it again on the slides. And you will also have the opportunity at the end of the presentation to raise your hand and give us your comments and questions verbally. I'm going to go on and share my screen, and I'm going to hand the presentation over to Emily Nealon, Air Quality Specialist in Planning here at the Air District.
Perfect. Thanks, Jessie. All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. As Jessie mentioned, we're here today to talk about the 2022 Ozone Plan. So thank you for joining us. As a quick background, next slide, please, Jessie. As a quick background, in October of 2015, EPA lowered the 8-hour ozone standard from 75 parts per billion to the more stringent level of 70 parts per billion in order to protect public health and welfare. Following the implementation of this more stringent standard, EPA designated the valley as extreme non-attainment. And with that, the district is required to adopt a new ozone plan with an attainment deadline of 2037. Today, we're here to discuss the current status of the plan development. Modeling, which has been fully conducted by CARB, as we'll be showing later today, shows that the valley will attain the 70 parts per billion standard by the 2037 attainment deadline. Additionally, the district published draft chapters and appendices of the 2022 ozone plan last week for public review. So we'll talk about that a little bit later, let you guys know where to find that. And then we will be tentatively publishing the proposed plan in July ahead of a late summer, early fall public hearing. All right, perfect. Next slide, Jessie. All right, so now we'll go a little bit deeper on the background of why we're here today. So EPA has adopted numerous national ambient air quality standards for a variety of different criteria air pollutants in order to protect public health and welfare. And specifically for 8-hour ozone, EPA has established 3 different standards throughout the years, as you can see on the slide. And these standards overlap one another, and each of the strategies within the plans build upon the next. So this graphic really is a great representation of that, of the complexity of the different standards, the timelines moving forward, and then the ultimate goal of the attainment deadlines. Perfect. Thanks, Jessie. Next. So since 1992, the district has adopted over 650 rules to implement aggressive ongoing emission control technologies in order to meet federal mandates. Through these efforts from the district and CARB, Valley NOx emissions have been significantly reduced since 1980, with NOx being reduced by over 75% overall, and stationary source NOx being reduced by over 93%. Next slide, please. So moving forward, the district is required to adopt a new 2022 ozone plan for the stringent 2015 8-hour ozone standard. And this plan, as I mentioned before, will build upon past 8-hour ozone plans, which includes the 2007 and 2016 ozone plans. And through these past attainment plans, the district has adopted, alongside CARB, innovative strategies that represent the nation's toughest air quality program. And through this effort, stationary source emissions have been reduced by over 90%. And the district is actually the only region classified as extreme non-attainment to reach attainment for the 1-hour ozone standard. So we've seen significant improvements in recent years. However, despite this significant progress, substantial further reductions in NOx emissions are needed in order to attain the 2015 standard. And this will take an effort from district, CARB, and EPA in order to identify additional measures and funding for the transition to new technologies. And it's notable that emission reductions are needed from mobile sources, which are under state and federal jurisdiction, as they make up over 80% of the NOx emissions in the valley. Next slide, please. So the district's numerous attainment plans have been a primary vehicle for improving air quality in the valley. And as I mentioned earlier, each plan builds upon the work of prior plans while establishing a path forward for continued air quality improvements. Following the adoption of each plan, the district implements the different plan strategies, which can include a variety of different strategies: regulatory development, outreach, continued research, and even incentive programs. And each plan is just one checkpoint in the continued effort to improve air quality in the San Joaquin Valley. And now I'll pass it over to Robert to discuss progress with respect to ambient air quality data. Thanks, Robert.
Hi, Emily, thank you. Yeah, so just looking at this graphic that's on this slide right here, we can see the district, the air basin for the San Joaquin Valley, and progressing from 2000 through 2020. The colors on the map are representing the improvements in the areas in our air district that have improved and made the improvements over time. And it's just a good graphical representation there of how the improvements have been made and where they have been made. Next slide. So just to talk a little bit about the data, the district has analyzed the ambient air quality data, and we've evaluated the air quality improvements. And as a comparison, from a period, as an example, 2000 to 2004, basin exceedances of the 2015 ozone standard had occurred between 150 and 190 times per year. Whereas in more recent years, the last 5 years, we see only about 100 exceedances per year. So this is a far reduced number, but also we see the reductions more specifically in the months of March through May, where we see a lot fewer exceedances there than we used to. And then ongoing emissions reductions have continued to bring areas of the region into attainment with the 2015 8-hour ozone standard, as we showed on the previous slide. And then also on the graphic here again of the air basin, we can see the areas with the specific design values at the monitoring sites throughout the district. And this progress is expected to continue into the future years. And just as a note, this data that's shown does include the wildfire impacts. So this isn't removing any exceptional event impacts. This is all of the data as it was. To see that progress is also what we're showing here, even with those impacts. Next slide. This is just another look at the data for the ozone design value, and showing from as early as 1990 through the current or most current data year of 2021, the progress that has been made. And as just a note, the design value is the 3-year average of the data for the highest site in the valley. And it just represents the progress that has been made here from 1990 through 2021. And as we see in the 2021 data point, when we do consider removing impacts from the wildfires, we can see that we hit that line for the 84 ppb, the 1997 standard. So this is progress that hasn't been seen before, and we're continuing to expect that line to go down over time. Thank you. And then on this slide, this is another look at the number of days that have the district has exceeded the various standards. So we're showing with the blue line on the top is the 70 ppb standard. That's the 2015 8-hour ozone standard. And then for comparison, the green line is the previous 2008 ozone standard, and the purple line is the 1997 standard. So we do see the higher number of exceedances of the lower standard, and that's a good indicator there on the progress. Again, as mentioned previously, the 2000 to 2004 period, we'd see exceedances up to 190 days per year, whereas the most recent data year, even including data that was impacted by wildfires, we see only around 100 days per year where we've exceeded that most stringent standard, the 2015 standard. Thank you.
All right, perfect. Thanks, Robert. So as I mentioned before, the majority of NOx emissions in the valley come from mobile sources, which are under state and federal jurisdiction. And as you can see here in the pie chart, only about 17% of the NOx emissions inventory in the valley is under the district's jurisdiction. So therefore, efforts from Carbon EPA are needed in order to reduce emissions from mobile sources, which is critical to attaining stringent air quality standards moving forward. Next slide, please. Thank you. So looking a little bit closer at the emissions inventory for the plan, which you can find in Appendix B of the drafts that were posted. The plan presents a thorough and recently updated emissions inventory, which shows a 62% reduction in NOx emissions between the years 2017, which is the base year for this ozone plan, and 2037, which is the attainment year for the plan. And these reductions are the result of already adopted measures by the district and CARB. And just wanted to note that the graphic that you do see here on the slide depicts the annual average of NOx emissions from CPAM 2019 version 1.04. So now we're going to get a little bit more into the nitty-gritty of various plan elements. And just wanted to first start off by mentioning that we did publish some initial draft chapters and appendices of the plan for public review last week. So you can find those on the district's website as listed on the slide. It's just the page for the 2022 ozone plan. And we are seeking public comment on these drafts, which you can email to airqualityplanning@valleyair.org by June 21st at 5 p.m. And now I'll pass it over to CARB to talk about the air quality modeling for this plan.
Thank you, Emily. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Chensha Kai. I manage the Regional Air Quality Monitoring section in the California Air Resources Board. So in the following slide, I will talk about the ozone seed modeling in San Joaquin Valley for the 70 ppb ozone standard. So yeah, on the screen, it shows the outline of my presentation. I will start from showing the long-term emission and the ozone change in San Joaquin. Some of those you already seen in the previous slides. The weekday weekend effect. Then I will talk about how we use model for ozone attainment demonstration and modeling configuration for the current San Joaquin ozone seed modeling. I will also show the model performance evaluation followed by our calculation of future year ozone design value for 2037. Next slide, please. Yeah, we saw similar plots in the early slides. This plot shows a long-term change of NOx and ROG emissions from anthropogenic sources in San Joaquin in the top panel, and the change of ozone design values in bottom panel during the past 20 years. In the top panel, the green line is for NOx emissions and the blue line is for ROG emissions. I also include 2018 summer ROG emissions from biogenic sources as purple triangle in the plot. So we can clearly see the substantial decrease of emissions for both ROG and NOx, especially NOx during the past 2 decades. So compared to the anthropogenic ROG emissions, the biogenic ROG emission is much higher. So this is also one of the reasons that reducing anthropogenic ROG emission is often less effective in controlling ozone. So the bottom plot shows that ozone design value decreased steadily from early 2000 to recent years. So this is an increase of ozone in 2020, which is largely due to the wildfire emissions. If we remove the 5 days, ozone design value in 2020 is lower than those in previous years. So next slide. When real-world tests that can separate the effectiveness of NOx and VOC emission control is a weekday weekend effect. So weekends, there are much fewer diesel trucks on the road, which leads to a large reduction of NOx emissions on weekends compared to weekdays, but with little change in ROG emissions. So change in ozone from weekday to weekend indicates a general responsiveness of ozone to NOx emission controls. So this slide shows weekday effect over time in northern, central, and southern San Joaquin since 2000. The scatter plot shows a correlation between average daily maximum 8-hour ozone for weekdays on y-axis versus weekend on x-axis. So the dots in the plot represent data for different sites and different years. So in each plot, the dots above the 1-to-1 line means weekday ozone is higher than weekend ozone, so lower NOx in weekend leads to lower ozone, therefore ozone is NOx limited. On the other hand, the dots below the 1-to-1 line means on weekends when NOx is lower, ozone is higher than weekdays and NOx control is beneficial. So in early 2000, many sites in the valley exhibit a NOx disbenefit. So southern and the central regions transitioned to NOx limited first, followed by the north. Majority of the warm color dots are above 1-to-1 line in the 3 plots, indicating in recent years all the regions are generally NOx limited with some variabilities from year to year due to meteorology or biogenic emissions. So NOx-focused control strategies will continue to be effective in the valley. Next slide, please. We use air quality modeling to demonstrate ozone attainment. Per US EPA guidance, the SIM modeling takes a relative response approach that uses both observation and model data. So we have observation data that represent our current level of ozone, which we call baseline ozone design value. The baseline ozone design value is the 5-year weighted average of both highest ozone from observations. For this SIP, since 2020 is an atypical year with large societal change due to COVID pandemic, so we excluded 2020 data from the baseline ozone design value calculation, and this approach is okayed by US EPA. The model can simulate current level of ozone and also predict future level of ozone. For SIP modeling, we don't use predict future ozone directly. Instead, we first calculate the relative change in ozone between the modeled future and baseline years for each monitoring size. The ratios are called relative response factors, or RFs. We then use RF to scale the observed baseline design value to get future year design value at each monitoring size. Next slide, please. So this is modeling configuration for the current sun-working ozone SIP. The plot to the right shows the two model domains. The outer domain is a statewide domain with 12-kilometer horizontal resolution, and the inner domain covers majority of the Northern California with 4-kilometer horizontal resolution. We first run CMAQ model for the statewide 12-kilometer domain and produce boundary and initial conditions for the inner 4-kilometer domain. We then run CMAQ model for the inner 4-kilometer domain and produce data for model attainment demonstration. For both 12-kilometer and 4-kilometer domains, we run 3 sets of simulations. The first one is base year 2018 simulation, which includes all the emissions and is used to assess model performance. The second one is reference year 2018 simulation, which is used to project future design value. It is same as base year simulation, except there's no wildfire emissions. The third is future year 2037 simulations, which is used to project future design value. The emissions we use is 2019 CPAM version 1.03 adjusted to CPAM version 1.04, because at the time of modeling, the version 1.04 was not fully finalized. The 2037 emission includes benefits from COP and district rules and commitments. Specifically, those include small off-road engine rules, heavy-duty IM, and state SIP strategy from COP, as well as recent rules for urban burning, boilers, glass melting furnaces, and internal combustion engines from the districts. Next slide, please. This slide shows the summer and subgenic emissions of NOx and ROG in San Joaquin Valley. This table shows the emissions from the baseline 2018 and the projected 2037 emissions with rules commitments that have already been adopted. The right 2 columns show the 2037 emissions with COP commitments from state SIP strategy. So we can see that in 2018, the NOx emission is about 222 tons per day. It is projected to be 87 tons per day in 2037. With COP commitments from state SIP strategy, the NOx emission will be further down to about 58 tons per day. In the modeling, we also include additional emissions from emission reduction credit, which is about 2 tons per day for NOx and 0 for ROC. Next slide, please. Before we model for ozone attainment demonstration, we always conduct model performance evaluation to make sure that the model captures concentrations of ozone and other air pollutants that are observed. So these 3 plots shows a correlation between modeled daily maximum 8-hour ozone with observations for northern, central, and southern San Joaquin, respectively. The strong correlation between model and observation data indicates very decent model performance for ozone simulation. Next slide. This is a time series plot for daily maximum 8-hour ozone at northern San Joaquin site. This is for Turlock. In the plot, the dots are the ozone data from observation. Black line is for modeled ozone at the grid cell where the monitoring site is located. And the crosses are the modeled maximum ozone in the 3x3 grid cell centered at the monitoring site. The high ozone concentrations from observation during the end of July and early August are due to the impact from wildfires. The model ozone are in good agreement with observations, except for the 2 highest ozone days when the site was under the fire impact. Next slide. This is a time series plot for Fresno Garland site, which is located in central San Joaquin. Again, the model captures observation very nicely, except for some of the fire impact days in the beginning of August. Next slide. This is time series for Edison site, which is located in southern San Joaquin. We also see decent agreement between model and observation. Next slide. This is my last slide. This slide shows the ozone design value at different sites in 2037. The table shows the name of each site, baseline ozone design value. 2037 ozone design value was 1 decimal, and the truncated 2037 design values. The truncated ozone design value are used for attainment demonstration. So we can see in 2037, the highest ozone design value in the valley is in Clovis, which is 67 ppb. And this also means the valley will attain the 2015 ozone standard in 2037. With that, I will stop here, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Go ahead and save questions for the end. Thank you, Chen Shaw.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Esamani.
Yeah. Hey, thanks, Jesse. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Nesamani Kalandur from California Air Resources Board. I'm going to discuss about the transportation conformity today. This slide provides background about transportation conformity. As you may know, the purpose of transportation conformity is to link and coordinate the region's transportation and air quality planning process. The chart on the right illustrates this point. A motor vehicle emission budget is established as part of the state implementation plan. It ensures that transportation activities do not cause or contribute to new air quality violations, increase the frequency of any existing violations, or delay timely attainment of national ambient air quality standards. Next slide, please. This slide discusses what's included in a motor vehicle emission budget. And MVB is the total allowable emission from on-road mobile sources such as cars, trucks, and buses. The chart on the right shows different emission sources considered in the SIP. The motor vehicle emission budget covers just one part of the emission pie in the SIP, that is on-road emissions. In other words, the budget serves as a regulatory limit for on-road mobile source emissions in SIP. As designated under federal and state law, the MVBs are calculated by CARB based on emission inventory and control measures in the SIP. Next slide, please. Yeah, thank you. This slide discusses the methodology used for developing budgets. The most recent US EPA approved emission factor model is MFAC 2017 for SIP and transportation conformity use. It provides the latest information on vehicle registration, age distribution, and control measures such as I&M program and vehicle technologies and fuels. MPOs provide VMT, that is vehicle miles travel, and speed using network-based modeling with most recent assumptions regarding transportation demands such as human population, employment, travel cost, and congestion level. MVB also includes emission reductions from the recently adopted regulations such as Advanced Clean Trucks, Low NOx Standard, and Heavy Duty I&M program. In addition, MVB also includes the on-road emission commitment from the regulations under development. For example, Advanced Clean Cars 2 and Advanced Clean Fleet. Next slide, please. To conclude, the take-home message is that conformity ensures that both the transportation and air agencies collaborate continuously. In addition, the budget must be based on the latest planning assumptions and US EPA approved emission factor model. Finally, the MVB must be consistent with the emissions inventory, control measures, RFP, and attainment demonstration. That concludes the conformity portion of the presentation. Thanks, Jesse.
Thank you, Desamani. As you can see, the ozone plan involves many, many parts, and we're going to spend the next few slides talking about some of the other parts that are currently under review and development or have already been met in some cases. And so the next requirement for ozone non-attainment areas is the VMT offset demonstration, and it's fitting that we talk about this after we talk about transportation conformity. Emily showed us earlier in the presentation that the district doesn't have direct regulatory authority over mobile sources, but mobile sources are indeed accounted for in this ozone plan. And one of the ways we account for that is through the state SIP strategy and reductions from mobile sources under CARB's or even EPA's control with the new federal regulations that have been proposed. We address VMT, vehicle miles traveled, through transportation conformity, and we also address it through the VMT offset demonstration. The Clean Air Act requires that regions offset growth in emissions due to growth in vehicle miles traveled, or VMT, through the implementation of transportation control strategies and transportation control measures. The district has already satisfied this requirement. In July of 2020, CARB submitted the 70 ppb ozone SIP submittal to EPA that included the demonstration of VMT offset. So we show that the baseline emissions inventory, and then we show the VMT emissions offset for the valley. Under this demonstration, you have to show that the blue column is shorter than the red column. And so what the Clean Air Act requires you to do is to project VMT growth with no new measures, and then do scenarios for no VMT growth and no new measures, and then do the scenario that is the most realistic, the blue one, the VMT growth and the new measures, and show that any growth in VMT is being fully offset and then some by the control strategy. So we've already addressed this Clean Air Act requirement through the CARB submittal back in 2020. Our ozone plan is also required to demonstrate reasonable further progress. This is sometimes called RFP for short. And basically, under any attainment plan, you can't wait to the last minute to get the emissions reductions that you need to attain the standard, but you need to document that there is steady progress in reducing your emissions through your adopted control strategy, and if needed, additional controls that you propose in the plan. This is a draft version of that demonstration. We'll have a more well-documented version of this table in future drafts of the plan. But through this draft analysis, we are able to show that we meet the required emissions reduction at the milestone years. So under RFP, you start with your base year, which for us is 2017. You do your first analysis at 6 years, and then you do analysis every 3 years thereafter. And as you can see in this table, there are specific percentages you're supposed to achieve. You can achieve it through VOC or ROG, reactive organic gases. Took me a second, it's been a while. I always call it VOCs for volatile organic compounds, but the ROG, the G in ROG is gases. So you can get your RFP through ROG or you can get it through NOx. And so this substitution shows that RFP has been met, will be met under this plan. And we do this through control measures. Obviously, a cornerstone of the plan is the control measures. And you have to show various levels of control measures in your ozone plan. You have to provide implementation of reasonably available control measures, or RACM, including reasonably available control technologies, or RACT, and then additional enforceable emissions limitations and other control measures and techniques and compliance schedules. So the plan will include a robust control measure analysis for all NOx and VOC rules. We are building upon the analysis of prior plans, including the 2018 PM2.5 plan, as well as the 2020 RACT SIP that the district adopted in June of 2020. We adopted that under this 2015 ozone standard, and we are including that analysis as a starting point as we continue to look to see if there are any additional opportunities to reduce emissions that are reasonably available based on technology availability, economics, and the unique considerations for our region. And what we see is that existing control measures and CARB's new state SIP measures provide substantial emissions reductions. You see evidence of that in the emissions inventory charts that you saw earlier in this presentation. The district is continuing to look beyond those measures, though, and we are evaluating additional innovative measures that can expedite ozone attainment and prepare our region for any more stringent future NACs that could be on the horizon. We know that our work isn't done, and we have to keep pushing the envelope and looking to new opportunities to reduce emissions. That requires us to look beyond your standard command and control regulations and so certainly regulations are a piece of the puzzle, but that can't be enough. And we have to look beyond the command and control, beyond our jurisdictional authority, and to include things like incentive programs to expedite fleet turnover, for example, issuing guidance documents, looking at best practices and other creative approaches. Some of the content areas we are trying to develop is a concerted effort to reduce emissions from locomotives, lawn and garden, and through building electrification, in particular, the electrification of appliances in buildings. And so these are concepts that are under development. They all have unique challenges. None of these are things that we can directly regulate as a regional air district, but they are all areas that we know that emissions reductions could benefit our region as we look to attain various NACs and to improve public health for the residents of our region. Our plan is also required to include contingency measures. These are specific measures that would be implemented if an area fails to meet a milestone for RFP or an attainment deadline. Contingency measures historically have been very challenging for our region and many other regions that have a very advanced control programs. Contingency measures are meant to be extra emissions reductions that you don't need, and we need all the emissions reductions we can get. This requirement has been made even more challenging over the years as litigation has changed interpretations of how states and regions nationwide understand what a contingency measure needs to be. Contingency measures are extremely challenging for several reasons. One, if you're not attainment for multiple NACs, it's really hard to set something aside as a backup plan. That's what contingency measures are. They are emissions reductions that you shouldn't need, but you have them ready just in case. Well, there is no just in case because we are not attainment for multiple NACs. We want to implement anything we can that's reasonably available to meet these standards. It's very hard to hold something back. Implementation, we already have implemented the most stringent stationary and mobile source emissions requirements in the nation between the district's rules and CARB's rules. We know we need to keep looking further, but even as we do that, we want to keep implementing the controls available whenever we can to expedite public health benefits. Part of what makes contingency measures so challenging is you're required to have automatic implementation through a contingency trigger. This means that the measure goes into effect immediately upon or very soon thereafter when EPA finds that you failed to meet a milestone or attainment without any further action by the regional agency or the state if the state has the contingency measure. This simply isn't feasible for most control technologies. Most control technologies take time and planning to put into place and cannot be implemented as quickly as some people understand contingency measures. And frankly, there's just a scarcity of measures that meet this highly restrictive contingency definition. When you look at what might be a contingency measure, when you take into account the fact that most of the emissions aren't even under our control, most controls we need to just implement, it's really hard to come up with something that satisfies the contingency definition. It's very difficult to come up with contingency measures for these RFP and attainment potential needs. Having said that, we recognize it is a requirement under the Clean Air Act, and we are working to identify appropriate contingency measures. And the district has been successful in identifying some select contingency measures in the past. For example, we've had a contingency measure in our fireplace rule for our PM 2.5 plans. We've had a contingency measure in our architectural coatings rules. So we're continuing to evaluate whether there would be opportunities for additional contingency measures within our regulatory program. With that, I'm going to turn the presentation back over to Emily to tell us about next steps and prepare us for any comments that anyone would like to submit today.
Perfect. Thanks, Jesse. So in regards to next steps for the plan, we will be publishing tentatively the proposed plan in July for public review, which will be followed by a late summer, early fall governing board public hearing, at which time we'll then be submitting the plan to CARB and then through to EPA for inclusion in the SIP. And lastly, as I mentioned before, the district's attainment deadline for the standard is 2037. Next slide, please. So the district has invited public participation and comment throughout this process. And specifically, as you can see on the slide, we've provided numerous updates to the district governing board and the Citizens Advisory Committee, in addition to hosting multiple public workshops. And we do continue to invite public participation and comment throughout the remainder of the process, which leads me to my next slide. If you have any questions or would like to submit any public comments, you can contact me, Emily Nealand, using the contact information provided on this slide. And additionally, I invite you to sign up for the district's Ozone Plan listserv, so you'll receive email updates on the plan development process moving forward. And now we will go ahead and open up for any comments or questions. You can go ahead and email any questions to webcast@valleyair.org or raise your hand on Zoom.
So see, why don't we start with folks who have raised their hand? I'm going to stop sharing my screen, but before I do, I want to remind everyone that if you would like to email in your comments for me to read out loud during this workshop, you can email webcast@valleyair.org only during this workshop. If you make comments after the fact, email that Air Quality Plans email or email Emily Nealand. We're always happy to talk to you about this plan. I'm going to stop sharing though, and see, why don't you tell us about our, allow our first commenter to provide their comments.
Thank you, Jesse. I do have a public comment, and that is with Jane Celine. Go ahead.
Hello, Jane Sellen, Californians for Pesticide Reform. Thank you for taking my comment. We strongly support the inclusion of measures to reduce ROG emissions from agricultural pesticide use in California. DPR has not updated its commitment to reduce ROG emissions since the 1994 SIP, when the regulatory target was 80 parts per billion. We recommend that CARB and the district work with DPR to set a meaningful target to reduce ROG emissions from pesticides by 75% from 2020 levels in the San Joaquin Valley Air Basin by 2037. The strategy for reducing emissions should prioritize actual use reductions, along with support for the adoption of less hazardous alternatives. We also recommend modeling pesticide ROG emissions and their contribution to ground level ozone. These recommendations are crucial for the following 5 reasons. The San Joaquin Valley is one of only 2 extreme non-attainment areas in the nation. The 8 counties that make up the San Joaquin Valley area are the 8 counties with the highest pesticide use in California, totaling over 130 million pounds annually. Number 2, according to CARB, VOCs are an important precursor or component in the formation of ground level ozone. Pesticides are an important source of VOCs. DPR's most recent report, annual report about VOC emissions, concludes that emissions of VOCs in the San Joaquin Valley from pesticides are over 16 tons per day. Number 3, adding pesticide use to the SIP helps the state achieve its environmental justice goals. 6 of the 8 counties in the San Joaquin non-attainment area are majority Latinx. Researchers at Cal EPA found that pesticides were the pollutants with the greatest racial and income disparities in the state. Almost all pesticides used in the state were in the California zip codes with the highest proportion of people of color. Number 4, pesticide use is a state-regulated activity and therefore one that can be addressed in the state strategy. Federally regulated emissions of NOx exceeded state-regulated sources in 2020. And they're expected to be double by 2030. This limits the state's ability to reduce ozone levels by continuing to reduce NOx emissions. Pesticide reduction strategies increase the ability of California to reduce ozone levels through state action. And finally, reducing pesticide VOC emissions can also help the state meet its carbon neutrality goals. One strategy for reducing pesticide VOC emissions is increasing certified organic acreage. Organic growers use fewer pesticides and organic practices build healthy soil. A long-term comparison of organic and conventional cropping systems found that the organic system sequestered significantly more soil carbon than any of the other systems studied. Therefore, reducing VOC emissions through reducing pesticide use via organic agricultural adoption can have the added benefit of significant soil carbon sequestration. We therefore urge you to pursue the partnerships and strategies necessary to include agricultural emissions in your overall ozone attainment strategy. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next hand I see up is Roger Isom.
Thank you. Got a couple of questions here. First, Could you explain a little bit more on the NOx, the meaning of NOx limited? I think I have an understanding, but I'm not sure that everybody might, with relation to, is it important to control NOx or more important to control ROGs? That's my first question.
Yeah, I can answer this question. This is Chensha. Yeah, for the NOx limited means that when we reduce NOx, so the concentration will go down. So both NOx and ROG are the precursor species for ozone forming, right? But depending on their ratios, the ozone can go down or stay the same or increase even if we reduce. But right now, if we look at the weekend plots, that it shows that, especially in recent years, I actually have another plot that's simple, that shows the weekend for 2018 to 2020. Actually, all the dots are above 1-to-1 line, which means that in all the three regions, they are basically all transitioning to NOx limited already. So, because in the slide, I show the plots for 2000 to 2020, but again, like as I said, if we only focus on the very recent years, we show significantly, I mean, all the regions are transitioning to NOx limited, which again support the NOx focus control strategies.
Thank you, Chincha. And so putting another way, what the modeling supports is that reducing VOCs does not benefit the valley's ozone concentrations. That's the NOx reductions that really get us the biggest ozone benefits.
Okay, thank you. That was what I was looking for, and I thought was the focus. When you look at some of the charts that are in here for numbers in terms of emission inventory, the units are missing. Is that tons per year, tons per day? What are those numbers? Specifically,
if you have a slide number, that might be helpful. It's usually tons per day.
So if you are talking about,
I just lost it. But if it's tons per day, that's fine, because it talked about ROG in one of the slides being like 290 tons per day, and then the biogenic ROG being upwards of 600 or more.
Yeah, that's the ton per day. Sorry,
Okay.
it's yeah,
So
I should have included that.
I guess with relationship to discussion of pesticides, and number one being the focus should be on NOx as opposed to ROG. The second being what is the percentage? What are we doing there? Is that going to make a difference? Related to that, the one thing I would say about the push to go to organic is the one thing that's lost on that is the yields are dramatically reduced, meaning that to have the same amount of production, you're going to have to farm considerably more farmland in order to generate that same production. And at a time when worldwide food production is failing to meet demand, worldwide demand, I think that's heading in the wrong direction, should be considered as well. Is there going to be a workshop at some point where you put all of this together, the state portion and your measures? I think that's the pretty important element as to what the state SIP is going to have and all the mobile measures that would affect us here. Are you going to put all that together so everybody has a complete picture of how this plan will come together and actually impact everybody?
Well, this CARB has already held workshops on the state SIP strategy, and that was the focus of the March workshop that we had on this plan. I would not rule out having another workshop if people think that that would be helpful. And we frequently give updates to our governing board meetings as well. So there could be multiple opportunities between now and the adoption of the plan to see all the elements come together.
Yeah, I guess that's my comment, is it's hard to understand everything and how this plan is going to impact industry or agriculture or anybody for that matter when it's all in different pieces. So I just, if some way to try to group everything together so that people understand, hey, this is what's going to take place and how you're going to be impacted. Certainly printing out every chapter and reviewing it like we always do with these is one thing, but to really understand how this is going to change things, I think everybody needs a complete picture. Just my recommendation. And we'll put some, one last comment, I'm sorry. So as we all know, in the San Joaquin Valley, the implementation of SGMA, or the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, is taking away farmland upwards of 1 million acres. In previous ozone plans, it was taken into consideration, and certainly in the modeling of the ozone uptake by crops, and most importantly by vineyards and cotton. that now is going to be dramatically reduced. Is that factored into the modeling and what that impact may have on Valley Ozone?
So the model does include the depositions, both dry deposition and wet depositions. I think that's probably what you are talking about, right?
Yes.
Yeah. The model reflects all the impacts from all those physical and chemical processes that impacts the ozone formation or termination.
So how can we get to the data to look at what acreages were used and what you were using to model that? Because obviously things have changed dramatically over just in the last 10 years, but going forward, the next 10 years going to be impacted as well.
Yeah, I think the model take into consideration about the change of the land use. So I think that should be reflected in the land use file.
And
that
we
we
can
use the
certainly
model.
have additional conversations about that.
Yeah.
We've noted your comment, Roger. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Next, we'll go to Gustavo Aguirre. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name.
Hi, good afternoon. Yeah, that's good enough. Gustavo Aguirre with Center on Race, Poverty and Environment. Here, our office is based in the Delano, city of Delano, Kern County. 16 years ago, actually today is my anniversary with the CRP. And one of the first things I learned working for an environmental justice organization was that at that time, 2006, and I believe it was approved in 2008, the state implementation plan at that time. One of the first things that I learned was, San Joaquin Valley is one of the two non-attainment areas. 16 years ago, at that time I had my hair was black, now it's gray. 16 years after, we're still talking about the same things. At the same time, you mentioned, share numbers that a lot of progress is made, that, stricten rules than any other state in the nation. But at the same time, we are still living in, in non-attainment area. For a, regular citizen like me, it doesn't make sense. What is being done to reduce this pollution? One of the things is why not including pesticides to reduce the pollution? The valley is known, as the basket food or food basket of the nation and other countries. To give us life, eating. But at the same time, the pesticides are killing us. Pesticides are, getting our health at risk and causing a lot of illnesses like cancer and respiratory problems and all of that to produce food. When the state agencies are going to take action and really, really consider, reducing the pesticide use. I think Mrs. Jane mentioned, all those facts, and the reasoning and the reasoning why to include pesticides in the plans, to reduce the pollution. If you don't do that, when we are going to be breathing cleaner air? We are one of the two areas in the nation that are not in attainment. And we are, I think, the best, the most progressive, and the most healthy in terms of economy state in the nation. And dealing with that, I will understand if it was, the poorest state in the nation and have no ways to work things out, but California is the richest state in the nation, and is it's a shame that the state agencies are not taking the necessary steps to also keep our health. It's great that we are the food basket of the world, but we also need to live and live a healthy life. So when you are going to include pesticides, and looks like you are doing some actions in other polluting sources, but when the agencies are going to include pesticides. Because I came to this country, 19 years old, I'm 60 years old, and I was with the Cesar Chavez Union, and one of the first, actions that I did as activist was to boycott grapes because of the use of pesticides. So 40 years later, going a little bit more back in my time, 40 years later, I'm still here, trying to, convince, the state agencies to do more on pesticides.
All right, thank you for your comment. And we do have several other people prepared to make comments today. And I will caution our attendees today that we are taking note of your comments on pesticides. It is not something our agency directly regulates, and it's not something that is likely to have a big impact on the Valley's ozone levels for the purposes of this particular plan. But we certainly are hearing those concerns and routing them to the right parties and the right vehicles for addressing those concerns. The next comment I see is Margaret Reeves.
Thank you. Again, I do want to address the pesticide issue. I won't repeat what Gustavo and Jane said. Instead, I actually want to respond to something that Roger said. In fact, it's not the case that organic is universally less productive than conventional. And the comparison is often just one crop with inorganic and conventional. Instead, there are many other benefits of organic that I want to mention. Increased soil organic matter, better water infiltration, retention, delivery. So water is a key issue, of course, in California. Multiple crops with economic return for those multiple crops, extended season and jobs. So I just wanted to correct the statement that organic is not viable because it's not productive. And just reiterate all the comments that Jane and Gustavo had about pesticides. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to Cynthia Pinto Cabrera.
Hi, hello. Cynthia Pinto Cabrera here with the Central Valley Air Quality Coalition. Thank you, Valley Air District staff and CARB staff for the presentation. And I'd just like to start off by echoing the comments of colleagues Jane and Gustavo for the inclusion of pesticides. I think there's definitely a lot of benefits, especially when it comes to soil knocks from fertilized fields. When talking about pesticides, definitely understand that there's jurisdictional issues, but pesticides has definitely shown to be a priority for San Joaquin Valley residents. So anything that the Air District can do to include and provide some of that relief, I think is really essential and crucial. Throughout the presentation, you all mentioned some aspects of public health, but however, kind of reviewing the plan and CVAC's engagement over the years on the various rule amendments to help meet attainment, there's still a really key portion that's missing, and that's a thorough health analysis alongside the socioeconomic impact analysis that you all do. And currently, as it stands, the Valley Air District seems to just only be accounting for the costs to the industry and these rules and these plans throughout these development processes. And public health is extremely important, and the social costs must also be factored into these sorts of plans. As we mentioned, and you have mentioned, that San Joaquin Valley is the most polluted air basin for several pollutants, including this ozone, with Valley cities ranking among the 30th in the nation. But about half of the Valley residents are actually really sensitive to this air pollution, and that includes pregnant people, people who work outdoors, people with pre-existing health conditions, children under 18, those that are over 65. That's almost all of us that are listening in here today. I think we all can identify as one of these quote unquote sensitive receptors that fall onto making us sick. And along with that, we have the highest asthma rates in the nation. And we just really urge the Valley Air District to include some of those health costs, including asthma attacks, lives lost prematurely, missed school days, missed work days. I think that we need to really start accounting for that when it comes to these plans alongside the costs to other industries. So thank you again, and we look forward to continuing to work with Valley Air on these issues.
Thank you for your comments. I will note that some of that public health benefits and cost analysis is provided in Chapter 1, which was posted last week, but we will continue to look for additional opportunities to bolster that information. The next comment I see is from Ruben Rodriguez.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. Hope you guys are doing good, and thank you guys for this opportunity and allowing us to, join together to bring this important matter to the light. I try to be real frank and real blunt about things, and I think that's the way we need to act in this type of environment, right? Things are serious, things are serious, and we are looking at a crisis in front of us. And I think, you guys' intentions are good, and you guys are most definitely trying to do what you guys can, but we need to speed this up a little bit faster. The situation is getting worse, and luckily this year we haven't had the issue with the forest fires yet. But it is difficult, and it gets more difficult. We need to make sure that we're on top of this, to make sure that we're regulating these agencies and making sure that we are holding these agencies accountable, and you guys as well as accountable, right? Because it takes a team to make sure that this is done properly in the right way. So thank you guys very much.
Thank you. Our next comment is from Naomi Martinez.
Good afternoon. I'm Nayamin. I'm the Executive Director with the Central California Environmental Justice Network. And I thank you for taking the time to put this presentation together. I would echo the comments that were made about pesticides. Our state, especially Fresno, Kern, and Tulare, are the 3 top users of pesticides, over 200 million pounds every year. And if you don't think that's something that is influenced our ozone levels, I don't think what else could do it. But talking back to what you could do, I didn't hear anything that, for example, they was pointed out that mobile sources are without your jurisdiction. But what about dairies? What are you going to do extra to regulate dairies? That's something that is under your jurisdiction. So are the oil and gas industry. There are, large sources of ozone pollution, and we want to see that included in some mitigation measures or ways to reduce pollution from these industries. So let's don't stop just by blaming CARB and needing to do more about mobile sources. Definitely, we would like to see less dirty trucks off the roads. We all want that, but that's not going to cut it. And, with all your presentation about all the rules that are in place, seems that we have, as the former APCO would say, not rock left unturned, but there's a lot of rocks that need to be turned. And we would like to be partners in turning those rocks and maybe making sure that every industry that could be regulated is regulated so that we can reach attainment. Thank you.
Thank you, Naomi. I'm smiling because I almost said no stone unturned early in the presentation. I realized that was an old talking point, so I'm having some nostalgia that you brought that up again. But your point is taken. Thank you for your comments. Next is Rocio Madrigal.
Good afternoon. I would like to comment on the jurisdiction that you might have on dairies, oil, gas, and wine factories. We know and children suffer from asthma. As Ruben mentioned, this is critical. It affects our heart, our lungs. I have a child with asthma, and it breaks my heart that every day since she was about 8 years old, she has to live with an inhaler. She went through school being embarrassed because she couldn't do exercises. She had to leave class and go do her inhaler. We have more and more people developing these critical diseases and having premature death. Now, if premature death is not urgency, I don't know what is. you know, the federal government gives subsidies for so many things. So give them subsidies for the trucks, give them subsidies to change the things in wine factories to better or contain the pollution and the dairies. There's so much we know we can do. Gustavo said it. You know, we're not asking people to take, you know, 1,000 from their limited budget. We're talking billions. This agriculture industry, wine industry, dairy industry, millions. They make millions, if not billions. So they need to do their part as well. But it seems that if somebody doesn't make them do it, they don't want to do it. And it's really frustrating because it's families do not have the resources to change what this valley is. My only recourse is to hope that one day we can move out of here, or at least my daughter has to move out of here so she can breathe better. It's not right that it goes further and further in the opposite direction instead of being better. So I ask you to please, you have the data, you have the numbers, you know this. And if we have to take federal money, state money, if we have to, you know, the farmers have to do their part too, the dairies have to do their part, there's money out there. So let's get this done, and with urgency, because the organs being affected, the lungs and the heart, you're killing people. The smog pollution is killing people. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next commenter is Lorena San Pedro.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Hi, good afternoon. My name is Lorena San Pedro. I actually live in the Central Valley, and I can personally tell you of the health problems that not only I have, but my family have due to the pesticides, which is why it should be included in the state's smog reduction plan. Like I said, my family and I have dealt with like asthma for many years, and it's all due to many environmental issues like pesticides, which is why pesticide use in the valley creates 16 tons of VOC emissions per day. SIP must be included in the meaningful target to reduce VOC emissions from pesticides. Their district must tell the Department of Pesticide Regulation to set this target. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Genevieve Amslum.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great, thanks. Hi, everyone. My name is Genevieve Amslum. I'm the Research and Policy Director for the Central California Environmental Justice Network. It was kind of hard to listen into this workshop because I keep hearing the repeating term of progress. Oh, we've made progress. Look at this progress. But to me, I still see a sustained public health emergency. I mean, we're hardly meeting any of the standards to date. And as Gustavo said it, the Valley has been dealing with this problem for decades. So it is hard to hear all the while that the district has the same talking points of we're doing everything we can, contingency measures are hard, modeling shows attainment. It's difficult to hear this. But so first, I want to talk about the public process. This workshop, while I appreciated y'all taking the time to share your expertise, it was very difficult to follow. A lot of the acronyms were not explained. You know, ROG, VOC, NOx, NOx limited. I think it was super technical. And so I urged the district to improve its ability to communicate this technical information in a way that the public can understand, because this was a public workshop. It's for the community, and so I really urge y'all to try harder to share this information in a way that we can all understand. Because what people do know is that their child has asthma. They do know how much a night in the emergency department costs. They know what it's like to live with a chronic respiratory disease. So, you know, this is important for everyone to understand. And I agree with Roger that more public process would be useful in this case. And on that point of public process, this is the first time I've seen the attainment demonstration. And to share this just today and then release a draft plan next month is again, poor public process. But my main point today is to that point of the fact that we're doing everything we can. there's nothing in this plan that's new to expedite attainment toward ozone. I see that there are new rules because AB 617 forced y'all to update some of those rules. And there's new CARB rules, but there's nothing new that the district is proposing for ozone. And so I think the district, oops, sorry about the dog. I think the district can do more here. For instance, pesticides, not poisoning our residents, I think is good enough reason to include in a federally enforceable SIP. But two, updating the district's indirect source review rule. You know, we talk about how this is has a lot to do with mobile sources. Well, the district has the ability to strengthen their ISR rule to really capture emissions from heavy duty trucks that are attracted to distribution warehouses or mobile sources attracted to rail yards. I think that's something that the district can do. Just update it be at least as stringent or more stringent than the South Coast rule. And again, what Naimeen said about oil and gas, closing loopholes. We don't even know all of the emissions that are coming from this industry, including the fugitive emissions that are leaking out. And also expediting some of the rules that have been put forward. Some of the rules included in this plan don't take effect until like 2031. And this is a public health emergency, and I think we need to be expediting. But to not take up more time and let others speak, I'll stop it there. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Next is Gustavo Aguirre again.
Yeah, how's it going? This is Gustavo Aguirre Jr., resident of East Bakersfield. Do you guys hear me?
Yes.
Right on. Director of CCJ in here in downtown Bakersfield. And yeah, I think a lot of what I was going to speak on has been touched on today. One being this notion of no stone left unturned, right? Where here, where the Valley Air District is missing an opportunity very much. So to not only quote unquote make progress, but get us out of attainment, get us into attainment with the rest of the regions in California. And I think just very quickly, I think obviously pesticides reduction measures are something that are critical, especially critical to frontline communities. Again, I think echoing, looking at and updating the indirect source rule review that actually reduces pollution associated with the vast, distribution centers that are growing. And if you look at master plans, particularly here in our county, in Kern County, we're moving away from ag and oil, quote, but we're moving towards, mass production of warehouses. So what does that entitle? And really the regulations on dairies, right? The Central Valley, you drive up the 99 or the 5 and you will see lots of dairies. And I think, dairies are also these stones that have been unturned in this ozone plan. So making sure that there's some serious emissions reduction kind of look at that. And then, looking at just like good land use practices, right? A lot of the land use practices here in the Central Valley have been pretty unsustainable, have been detrimental to communities. And so how do we look to either retiring or rerouting kind of dirtier trucks altogether? And so, yeah, just deeply emphasizing a lot of the talking points that have been shared already with my compañeros and compañeras.
Thank you for your comments. And I apologize for saying again, I realize that you and the other Gustavo are two different people. So thank you both for sharing your comments today. Next we'll go to Gabriella Fascio.
Hello, can you hear me? Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Gabriella and I reside in the city of Bakersfield. I've lived and worked in the county of Kern for most of my life. My family, as well as the farm worker community I advocate for, they are exposed to ozone pollutants in the county of Kern every single day. Our farm worker community spend 12 plus hours a day, 6 to 7 days a week during the season exposed to not only a basket full of pollutants, but other health impacting sources as well. We need to make sure that our most vulnerable communities are as protected in this county. And as the pandemic continues, the forest fire season approaches, record high temperatures continue to exceed every year, and the heavy lack of regulation for agricultural industries, dairy, and oil and gas industry continue, including pesticide reduction measures, more measures focused on oil and gas industry, regulations on dairies, and a truck retirement measure that will help remove these old, heavy polluting trucks from the roads is heavily overdue. I feel the need to remind you all, even though that I'm sure that all of us are very well aware, that 14 different oil well leaks were found recently in heavily residential areas in Bakersfield, including my own area. So more measures focused on the oil and gas industry are again extremely overdue. Accountability to these industries that are, like other folks said, making millions off of the work of our direct community is way overdue. We need the district to take this plan serious and include measures that clean up our air as fast as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next commenter is Jasmine Buenrostro.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
And thank you for saying my last name right. I appreciate that.
Oh,
So I just want to make a public comment myself. I have lived in the Central Valley for my whole life. I currently reside in Fresno, and I myself suffer with internal lung disease. The reason for this exposure happened to be because of dairies, and also because of my autoimmune disorders that I have. But my doctor said that if I was to live in Stanford or up in the Bay Area, the possibility of me getting internal lung disease wouldn't have occurred. So I'm just advocating for myself and for others as well who not only have internal lung disease, but also have asthma. And like how a person mentioned in the comments earlier, I think her name was Rocio, she mentioned how her daughter has asthma as well. And it's hard because eventually it's going to affect your hearts, and we have to advocate for the rest of the people as well, you know, because we are the ones who are suffering and they're making billions of dollars. They could do so much and invest in better cars, vehicles that are like electricals that will not be polluting the air.
Thank you for your comments. Next is Lupita Beltran. Lupita, we can't hear you yet.
Buenas tardes. ¿Ahora sí me escuchan?
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Ok, yo como miembro de la comunidad, primero agradezco el espacio para poder dar nuestras opiniones y
Okay,
espero
as
que
a member of the
realmente
public, I thank you for the space for giving us an opportunity to express our opinion.
nos tomen en cuenta todas estas opiniones porque yo vivo en el área de Fresno.
Okay, and I really hope that you take these comments into consideration, and I do live in the community of Fresno.
Y es muy lamentable y triste que ya todas las enfermedades respiratorias como el asma ya están como más comunes y no haya hecho realmente algo, ¿no? Entonces, yo realmente quisiera pedir que más que se enfoquen en explicar números, estadísticas y porcentajes, que sí sé que son importantes, pero que realmente vean todas las cifras de personas enfermas por la mala calidad del aire. Y eso también en Fresno provoca mucho lo que es los pesticidas. Nosotros estamos dentro de una área rodeado de campos y eso es todo lo que es pesticidas, todo llega y no se va, y eso afecta mucho en la calidad del aire y sobre todo en nuestro organismo, ¿no? No podemos respirar ya. Mucha gente llega aquí al área del Valle Central y si no tenía asma la empieza a desarrollar, y es importante también saber que muchos de los centros de distribución a veces crean más problemas de los beneficios que hay. Entonces, probablemente digan va a haber más trabajos, va a haber más esto, pero ¿qué tanto ellos producen más contaminantes que beneficios para la población?
And it
Gracias
is
por
really
escucharme.
sad to see so many illnesses around our community, especially like asthma. And so it'll be great to see more information on statistics. We live in a community that's surrounded by different fields. And so the exposition to pesticides, it's vital, it's happening every day. So I know there's a lot of different distribution centers being established within our communities. And even though they provide different opportunities for job development and the like, we still need to be putting more information out there, educating our public on these different pesticides, and provide more statistics on the different illnesses happening within our community. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lupita. Our next commenter is Sarah Aird.
Yes, thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great, thank you. Yes, I just wanted to comment. So first of all, I'm Sarah Aird, Policy Specialist with the Statewide Coalition Californians for Pesticide Reform. And we have staff, organizers, and allies who we work directly with in the San Joaquin Valley, especially with and directly with communities in Kern County, Tulare County, Fresno County, Stanislaus County, and Madera County. And these communities are suffering disproportionately from asthma and other respiratory ailments to which pesticides directly contribute. And as others here have mentioned, we know that pesticides directly contribute to ozone. I haven't been able to be in this hearing for the full time, but I understand that the Air District is contending that it does not have jurisdiction over pesticides. I would like to challenge that and just say that as a coalition, we are very frustrated that we have talked with the California Air Resources Board and the Air District about this in the past. The California Air Resources Board acknowledges that not only the Department of Pesticide Regulation has authority over pesticides, but in fact that CARB and the Air District does have authority over pesticides, specifically toxic air contaminant pesticides after their use and after they have volatilized. Many toxic air contaminants are volatile organic compounds. They are fumigants and they contribute directly to ozone. The Air District does indeed, in fact, have not only authority, but primary jurisdiction once those pesticides have been used and have turned into a waste gas. So really happy to share again the memo that we've shared and circulated before, but I am concerned that, CARB actually acknowledged in the SERP, in the AB 617 SERP in Shafter, it's on paper, CARB acknowledging this shared jurisdiction over pesticides. And so it's very frustrating in a public hearing to have this yet again being countered. And I think we'd really like to talk with CARB and with the Air District again and go over what CARB acknowledged is authority that the Air District and CARB has.
Thank you for your comments. Our next commenter is Michelle Pereira Ryan.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, I'm Michelle Pereira Ryan, and I live here in the Central Valley, and I'm with California Nurses for Environmental Health and Justice. And I've been a nurse and a nurse practitioner for over 30 years. And so I've seen what the smog or ozone changes have caused, to people here in the Valley. And so when the same kind of thing that people have talked about, pesticides are definitely a part of it, with our 16 tons of VOC emissions per day, which is the volatile organic compounds, along with the nitrates combined in the presence of heat and sunlight. And we are getting tons of heat here now in the Valley. So things are changing because of the amount of heat we're having. So that exposure to those gases, to those compounds are making our ozone layers worse. And so those are things we need to take into account, is the climate changes that are happening are worsening our ozone layer in combination with these things that people have talked about, so smog from cars, talking about pesticides. When we talk, especially with the 5 and the 99 going straight through our valley and having tons of cars, plus our huge agricultural region, as people were talking about with dairies, with pesticides, all of those things we need to take into consideration. And then, we have seen so many health problems from these ozone, headaches, burning eyes, wheezing, coughing, asthma, and heart disease, because you have to remember we all need oxygen. And as our air gets worse, there's less oxygen content in it. And so we need to think about how that's impacting our health. And then the other thing that I would like to share that Genevieve shared is that when you guys are doing your presentations, it would be great to do it in so much more of a manner that most people could understand, because here I have a PhD in public health, and so much of what was being said, I mean, it was just flying by me because I had to be watching and looking, and I'm thinking, okay, if I have that and I'm having difficulty, you know, what is most lay people in our valley, you know, how are they understanding these presentations? And so definitely if you guys could take a look at how you're presenting the material when it comes forward, would be wonderful in the future. Thank you.
Our next commenter is Yelisa Ambries.
Hello, everyone. My name is Elisa Ambris, and I am a resident of Fresno in the Central Valley. I am a daughter of farm workers. My parents are farm working parents, and a lot of farm workers work outside, and they don't have the protections working outside to be protected. The N95 don't protect them from ozone. And so I just want to advocate for farm workers. And I also have asthma, and me and my siblings all have asthma, and we have been impacted by that as well. And so I just want to uplift and echo all of the comments that were also made, to have to take this more seriously and clean up our air as fast as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. I have been monitoring our webcast email inbox, and I'm not seeing emails there. I will go then next to Bianca Lopez.
Hi, my name is Bianca Lopez. Thank you for unmuting me. I had something written out in support of what many of the speakers here are saying, but I wanted to maybe just speak from the heart. I live in the Central Valley. I was raised in LA, and so I've lived my 39 years in both non-attainment areas. I have asthma, so does my 4-year-old son, and I am not looking forward to him missing school due to his medical condition. I live in the home of one of 2 waste incinerators where 9 million pounds of pesticides are used every year. And I think cumulative impacts are real and should be acknowledged by your department. And just listening to your reaction to the comments about pesticides kind of bothered me. They sound obnoxious when you said that they are not within your jurisdiction and that they're not that important. Well, DPR's most recent annual report about VOC's emissions conclude that emissions of VOCs in the San Joaquin Valley from pesticides are over 16 tons per day. And maybe I misheard your comment, but to hear that it's not that important was kind of concerning and upsetting. You or me, we, my children, and others like us who live in the Central Valley and ag country cannot afford to leave any possibility to help reduce the ozone. I would like you to really, at your next community meeting or presentation that you have, to go beyond checking this box that you informed us and that you've told us where you're at, because I feel that that's what you're doing. And that's what a lot of agencies, state or government agencies do. They say, yeah, we held that community, but where are you going to place that input that we've been giving you? So at your next follow-up or in your update documents, we should see some of these changes. So you don't just get to hear from us and then put our comments to the side. We want to see those changes, and our suggestions, our requests, our pleas to be implemented, not just in a box to check off. And I just like to say that I agree with the previous comments made by Jane, Gustavo, Nayamin, all the folks that here, basically giving you an earful, right? And maybe the 2 of you are not fully responsible, but your team is, and you're representing who you're representing here today. And so this is for you. And you need to make sure that the right people get to hear these comments, because we're not just a box to check off, and that's exactly what it feels like. Your presentation was only in English. Yes, you have an interpreter, but visuals are very helpful. As Michelle stated, for her, it was difficult to follow along, and she's a professional in this field. So visuals help. I'm a visual learner. I was actually driving and I couldn't really, focus on your presentation except for your words. But if I was a Spanish speaker, that would not be helpful. Okay, so we're not just a box to check off. You need to be more intentional. And yes, I'm upset, but so my point is that you should consider, do more than just consider what our comments and these people here are saying here today.
Thank you for your comments. And I will say that for all the comments we've received at the workshop today, we will be drafting a comments and responses document. So at a minimum, we will reflect the comments made today in an appendix that goes with the plan and prepare responses to these comments. And as appropriate, we will in fact take the comments we've received today and fold them into the plan where we can. We heard a lot of comments about pesticides today, and we are certainly going to include those comments in our comments and responses. To clarify a little bit, my earlier response was that DPR has the primary authority over pesticides, which is true. But I also hear what you're saying about how pesticides have come up in the SERP. And so I will acknowledge that, the ozone plan is just one vehicle for addressing air quality concerns in the San Joaquin Valley. In the ozone plan, because pesticides are VOCs, they have a somewhat less of a role to play in ozone formation, but that certainly does not mean that they are not a public health concern. So we can also route these comments to our AB 617 team for further inclusion and in the certs and our other air quality efforts as there are good connections to be made there. I want to thank everyone for taking the time to be here today and unpack a lot of material with us. And thank you for sticking around to provide these comments. We really appreciate it. And seeing no more comments, we will close the workshop. Thank you.